Welcome back to another episode of Stop the Scroll. I'm your host, Heidi Schmidt, and today I'm talking about something that is super, super personal to me, being an introvert in business. So, for those of you who don't know me, I am a pretty big introvert. And, when we think about introverts, we think about those shy people, but it's not just about being shy. It's how you process your energy and your information. Us introverts, we tend to recharge through those quiet moments. I tell my husband a lot when I have busy weeks, because, being an introvert also doesn't mean that we don't like being around people. It just means that to recharge, like we typically are a little more introspective. After lots of external stimulation, like us introverts, we need our quiet time, which can be really hard as a business owner, especially when you're out there networking, when you feel like you have to show up on social media and all of these things taking that energy from you. It can be really hard. Like, I feel it. Some of the challenges, especially for me, that I have had over the past 4 years, networking is really hard for me. Just walking into a crowded room full of strangers has always been something that is beyond intimidating for me. And I know introverts who are really, really, really good at being able to network, being able to converse with people, even if they don't know them well. I am not I'm not one of those people historically. I have a client who is very deeply introverted, and the thing that really differentiates a lot of us introverts is that we might not have the widest network of people, but chances are we have deeper networks. Like, our connections are high, high quality. They're not, I'm not going to have a party full of 50 people. I might have a party of 10 people, but those 10 people are like people that I really want to spend my time with that don't just suck all of my energy. Because having to be on and having to be that face in front of people who don't necessarily know me is really, really hard for introverts like me. Which, as a business owner, when you're trying to build connections and network, it can feel daunting. It can honestly feel super daunting. And it's funny because when I have busy weeks, which may have like multiple networking events or whatever, or even like days when I have lots of client calls, when I'm done with my day, often like my husband will be like, talk to me, talk to me. And I'll be like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Like, don't talk to me. I need to recharge. It's a challenge, especially when your spouse is super extroverted and needs the attention of a 10-week-old puppy. Love him. I really do. Other challenges for introverts can be, public speaking. The amount of anxiety. Recently, I led a free workshop for the first time ever. The amount of anxiety I had leading up to that, and maybe that's more about imposter syndrome, but ooh, public speaking, and I've gotten much better at it, I will say. Sometimes I tend to overshare. I think if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you probably captured that. I am definitely an oversharer of all of the things, which is not, I don't know if that's typically an introvert quality. I don't know. Maybe it's my neurodivergence. Maybe it's my ADHD. I don't know. Sometimes I like to overshare. I feel like it makes me more relatable. And that's probably a little bit of everything. I have learned, one of the challenges of introverts in business can be overstimulation, and that can come from networking events. For me, it comes from like many meetings in a day. I will say I've gotten much better over the past year of not over scheduling myself. And recently I talked about how I let go of an agency client of mine because I was ultimately managing too many clients. But there would be days when I would have 5 hours of calls, and it was just too much. Like, I can't on an average day, like, I have more days now during a month where I don't have meetings, which is great. But when I have days that are like back to back to back to back, or you have to be on, like you have a networking event and then you have client meetings or you have a board meeting, whatever it is, ooh, like, that takes a lot of energy, man. It takes a lot of energy. For us introverts, though, like everyone thinks that you have to be extroverted to be in business. I disagree. Us introverts, we have our strengths. Some of the research that I did said that, strengths of introverts in business are deep focus. We tend to be more focused. Although if you're an introvert like me who probably has undiagnosed ADHD, like my focus wanes, my creative juices wane. But when I hit that like stride, I can really tune out distractions and deeply dive into projects as I need to. Sometimes it just takes me a little bit longer to get started, and I might wait until the last minute. We're better, I think, personally, thinking about the extroverts that I've known in my life. And not that all extroverts don't have meaningful relationships, they do. But I'm thinking about a really good friend of mine, and she is super extroverted. And, we've been friends for over 20 years. But I will say, like, she is super into, she lives out west, and she is super into her network where she lives. She's not very good at staying in touch. And not to say that extroverts are bad at staying in touch, I'm sure they're fine. This is one example of one person in my life. I have many extroverts in my life. But as an introvert, I feel like I am much better about building those genuine, long lasting connections. I have former clients of mine who still come to me for advice, who have really become genuine friends, like people that I would enjoy spending time with. And they know me, they advocate for me, they refer me to people, and vice versa. I refer friends and current clients to other past clients. There's more of that opportunity to build those meaningful relationships. One of the strengths that I saw, and this is I'm trying to be a better listener because it's so important. And as a lot of people with neurodivergence often have a really hard time listening because we'll get something in our brain and we want to get it out while it's in our brain and we're thinking about it. So I've really tried to be more mindful about not interrupting and being a better listener. There are lots of introverts who are really, really good. Like that is their superpower in listening. For me, it's definitely a power. I am really good at like deep diving and getting a deep understanding for clients when they first come to me. Like, you tell me who your client base is, you tell me what your pain points are. I can give you a solution pretty quickly. I can tell you, hey, this is what you should be doing differently. But you're missing this, XYZ. Maybe you have this blind spot. When I hone in on those listening skills, and I really try to be really good at those, like on my strategy sessions and my consulting calls, those are the things that introverts are historically really, really good at. If you are an introvert like me in business, here are some tips that I've heeded over the years. As I mentioned, networking can be really, really daunting for me, but it doesn't have to be. Everyone that I've heard, and I follow some like other introverts in business who kind of coach us introverts. I don't have a coach for that. I have a couple of business coaches that coach me on different things. One of the things that I've always seen mentioned is quality over quantity. And it goes back to those relationships. Make sure that when you're networking, like maybe find smaller events, targeted gatherings where it's not as big of a room, but maybe the people are more likely to be your people, if that makes sense. There's some value to prepping in advance to have those conversation starters, to, have your elevator pitch basically. Your 30-second, this is what I do, this is who I help, this is my value statement, whatever it is. I don't necessarily like to follow up via phone, and sometimes I'm even forgetful about following up via email. I am more likely to connect on something like linked to saying, hey, really enjoyed connecting with you at X event. I've done that before. That's usually a lot of how I tend to connect with people. Not always. Sometimes I'm really bad at the follow up. I'm not going to lie. When it comes to client communication, I try to open myself up to my clients. And maybe that's, a blind spot for me and tends to open me up more for like people just plowing down my boundaries. And there is something to be said about understanding how your clients communicate best. For me, Sometimes if it's urgent, I tell my clients this. If it's urgent, I always ask them, well, one, I always ask them how they prefer to be communicated with. Some of them it's text, some of them it's email. And I try to respect that. Generally, if they're a texter, I'll be like, you know what, text me anytime. Because I really just want to make sure that those lines are open for communication more so than anything. I don't care if you text me or if you email me. Know, and I tell my clients this, I'm like, know that I might not always respond. If it warrants a response, I will respond hopefully in a mostly timely manner. Oftentimes I'll see text messages because, our screens pop up messages all the time. Sidebar, I've gotten much better about using Do Not Disturb on my phone, which has helped a bunch. I will often make a point to respond either immediately or I tend to respond to messages first thing in the morning, like when I'm first starting my day. That's usually when I tend to follow up with things. There's a lot to be said about blocking out your schedule. One of my coaches is big on time blocking, and I've really tried to be better about that. But at the same in the same realm, like I have to leave open my calendar for strategy sessions. Like I can't necessarily always have time blocks on my calendar if I'm trying to sell strategy sessions, if that's my big thing. I've tried to make sure that I leave open blocks, but also understanding that like, okay, if I have a call scheduled this day for a strategy call, like that's a solid 2.5 hours of my day. Even though they're 90-minute sessions, like I usually do 30 to 45 minutes of prep beforehand. And then afterwards, like I want to make sure, because if I don't follow up immediately, and I know this about myself, it'll stay on my to-do list for like days. And then I hate getting emails. And this is, again, neurodivergence. ADHD is a tough thing, especially when you realize in your 40s that you have it and you've never done anything. And oh, that explains my perfectionism and my procrastination. It's really something. Pulling back a lot of curtains here. I'm getting real personal. Please, if you're listening and you're questioning whether or not to work with me, I promise I am a peach. I love all my clients and almost to the detriment of treating myself like a client. And I've talked about this before. Like one of the big lessons that I've learned this year is that I need to treat myself like a client. And some of that is setting these boundaries, blocking off time for other projects, making sure that I understand, like, okay, I know that I need to prioritize this follow up. If I don't do it today, like, say a strategy call is at the end of the day, like, it needs to be the first thing on my list for tomorrow. Those type of things are like lessons that I have learned. Think of a lot of introverts in business that I know that have a really hard time marketing themselves. And what I mean by that is that they have a hard time showing up. They have a hard time presenting themselves because they're like, well, I don't want to be on social media, but you have to be the face of your business. You have to understand that your expertise needs to shine. And yes, it can shine. There is something to be said about the whole faceless reels movement, which I have mixed feelings on, honestly. But there are other strategies. Like maybe social media isn't your thing. Maybe it's not where your audience is. Maybe you should have a small presence, but it's not going to be your marketing priority. Those are things that, I get to the root of in my strategy sessions with clients is we talk a lot about, well, what are you doing for marketing? What is working? You don't know what's working? Like, here's what you should be measuring to understand what is working for your business. Ultimately, tap into what is overwhelming you about your marketing. Like, if you're struggling with that, if you're an introvert. But I always say, more than anything, yes, we need strategies. And yes, marketers like myself fully emphasize strategies almost to a detriment. Ultimately, what's going to work best is you showing up consistently and authentically. And that's really what I help my clients with is if they're like, hey, I don't want to manage this. Okay, we'll manage your consistency 100%. We'll understand your brand. We will showcase you in your best light 100% working towards the goals that we set together in our onboarding. But if you're just like struggling to even show up and you don't have the resources to outsource it because not everyone does, I say just be authentic. Social media in that realm is your tool to make those connections with people who might want to work with you. So Think about that and prioritize that authenticity and consistency over anything else. And that goes for not just social media, that goes for, if you have an email newsletter, if you have a podcast, if you have a blog, whatever you're doing for marketing, like keep it consistent. As an introvert, I sometimes get in my own lane and I get hyper focused. I'm really sometimes not great about delegation to my team. I have really, really worked on communicating with them more and making sure that I'm sharing the things that need to be shared with them from clients, et cetera, et cetera. If you're outsourcing and delegating and you have a team, like, how do you surround yourself with those complementary strengths? Are there things that you don't like to do? I would love, 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 love someday to get big enough, maybe. I don't know if I want to be this big. Maybe I do. To have an actual business development person who's in charge of all the networking and bringing in the leads and, scheduling the calls. And I can do the calls, I can sell myself pretty well. But someone else who's kind of like, I don't know, just doing that lead gen type of stuff. All the stuff that we get stuck in the weeds with, like, I feel like this is common of introverts is we get stuck in the weeds a lot. Make that kind of stuff. Take it off your plate. Automate, outsource, whatever it is you need to do, because it's just going to prevent you from doing the work that matters. Finally, as an introvert, as an extrovert, everyone, business owners around the world, let's rejoice around the fact that we need to prioritize our own self care. Building in that recharge time is so, so important. Like, whatever it is for you. My son starts school so late, and we've been driving him to school lately. And I like it for like the mornings because we get that special time with him. Like, he's not on a device, we're not rushing to something, some sort of activity. Like, and not that my son is overscheduled, but like by the end of the day, he's pretty like tapped out. Parents of neurodivergent kids know that it takes a lot of energy to wear a mask to seem like you're neurotypical when you aren't, to feel like you have to show up a certain way. And especially in our public school system, like they are trying to fit some square pegs into round holes, and sometimes it doesn't work. But I will say, some of the things that I like to do to set my self-care, set my day up for success, like I am a huge reader. Like if I need to take 20 minutes, like I will go into my room, I will lay on my bed and I will read. And sometimes that's the resetting that I need. For me, I also love just like and there's so much research out there about this, about how just like being outside when you start your day helps like lower your stress levels, your cortisol levels, all that kind of stuff. So I like to make it a point, and it's easier in the summertime than it is, in the fall and when we're not trying to get my son to school at 9 o'clock because I feel like half my morning's already gone. But figuring out like those type of self-care routines, whether it's starting your day, whether it's ending your day, whether it's recharging after a busy day, what are those essentials for self-care for you? Everyone's so different. For me, like I love starting my day with like a walk or a run or something, which I don't do nearly as much during the school week because 9 o'clock start time. Let me tell you how I'm cranky about that. It's new. Like last year, he was in elementary school and we dropped him off at like 7:50, and it was like, oh, we have from 8 to 9 to really get things done. And I'm not a huge morning person, so like that 8 to 9 hour was great for me. It's either like go for a walk, go for a run, and like start my day by 9:30. Now I'm like getting home from drop off at 9:30. So like if I wanted to run in the morning, I'd have to be up at like 6:30 and it's still dark and rah, let me complain. Anyhow, whatever. I digress. Have those kind of recharge opportunities in your back pocket. Again, I peeled back the curtain. I got real personal here, telling you all the things, all my weaknesses. But it's hard sometimes, and I speak more from a neurodivergent person here. I feel like there's a whole generation of 40-something millennial women who are just like undiagnosed ADHD. I see this a lot on Instagram, and every time I see something about it, I'm like, that is me. That is me. it shows up so differently in women than it does with men. And when I was growing up back in the like 80s and 90s, it was like those hyper boys were the kids with ADHD, not the overachieving perfectionist girls who are waiting until 11 o'clock to start a paper that's due the night before or the night after, whatever. In business, I really had to get out of my shell because, like I said, like networking is not easy for me. It is not easy to just like strike up a conversation with someone. Like even my Instagram engagement, I don't love doing engagement for clients. I do it kind of. There are few clients that we do it for, but I've really kind of leaned out of that. Like there are other engagement specialists who are fantastic at it, but for me, it doesn't feel authentic to me. And it's not something that comes easily to me to just like go leave a comment on someone who doesn't follow me, who I don't know what they are, on behalf of someone else. Like that doesn't, eh, meh. That's not my thing. I'm working with someone to kind of get better at that, at least for myself. So, yeah, there's lessons to be learned. And if you're an introvert in business and you struggle with some of these things, networking, managing your team, all of those things, I see you. I see you. If you struggle with your marketing and just showing up because it feels daunting to you, I see you also. So, that is all that I have for today. Fellow introverts unite. Send me a message if this resonated with you. If you love what you hear, please, please, please go follow me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. Leave a review. Reviews help all of us podcasters get found by more people and connect with me on social. Send me a DM and be like, hey, I really loved your episode. I love those messages. Sometimes when you're marketing or when you're doing a podcast, it can feel like you're speaking to the void. But when people tell me that content that I put out resonates with them, that's what really is super meaningful to me. So until then, go forth, show up authentically with content that stops the scroll. If you're an introvert in business, I see you. Until next time.